Most sax players absolutely love fingering charts. When you're a beginner, they're a great resource as you're extending your range and learning all those new notes. And even when you're an advanced player, they're really useful for looking up alternate fingerings and maybe just seeing what other players are using. But what if I was to tell you that the fingering chart right in front of you is lying to you a lot of the time and is not actually what most pros play? That's what we're going to talk about today, and also stick around and I'll tell you how to get a load of free video resources that you're not going to want to miss. So let's get into it. So we've all seen videos of great players. Parker always springs to my mind, where you watch a video of them and the fingers barely seem to move when they're playing. Now, there's a lot of things that go into having great technique on saxophone. It's the hours you spend in the practice room, it's being relaxed in your fingers and your body as a whole, but there's also a deep understanding of the mechanics of the saxophone that really helps these players be so fluent and play so fast with so little effort. Now, if you look at your standard fingering chart, which is where we find most of the technique, where to put the fingers, what buttons to press, then it tells you very clearly how to play each note, and that's absolutely fine, and from that point of view a fingering chart is generally correct. However, in context, when you're playing a scale or a certain passage in a piece of music, they don't necessarily stay true to the reality of playing the instrument. So we're going to look at a few examples today that show you some of the things that the pros are doing that the fingering charts are not telling you to do. So let's take a really simple scale. We'll take a B flat major scale. Now, there's a couple of ways of playing the note B flat. If you look at a fingering chart, one is using the side key, so that's like an A fingering with the bottom right side key. However, the usual fingering for B flat in scales that contain that note is to use the B flat biz key. That's that little button below your B key, and what you basically do is you play a B, and if you move your finger down in parallel, so you're covering both the B key and that little button B flat key, the biz key as it's called, then that means that when you play that fingering, instead of getting a B like you normally would with that first finger on your left hand, you'll actually get a B flat. Now that makes it really useful because you don't need to remember to play that accidental in a piece of music. Every time you play a B, you'll get a B flat, and that makes it great. So we're going to look at this B flat major scale using the B flat biz key, and to me that's how it should be played. So here's the general fingerings that you'd find in a fingering chart for each note of this scale, just over one octave. And for all those notes out of context, those fingerings are absolutely correct. However, in the context of playing this scale and numerous other scales that contain the note B flat, you can actually keep your finger on that button all the time. Now, the fingering charts don't suggest doing that. As you can see on the note D, then it's just a D, and the biz key isn't highlighted, or the note E flat or the note F. The biz key isn't highlighted. However, you can keep it pressed down for all of these. In fact, out of this entire scale, only two of the notes are written correctly in a fingering chart, and that is the biz key B flat for the note B flat and the note C, where your finger just isn't on that button anyway. However, even in that instance, you should be hovering just above it to get back on. So let's have a look what the actual fingering for a B flat major scale would be. So you can see for every single note, I'd be holding down that B flat biz button apart from the note C. And this gives us lots more fluency. It means we don't have to take our finger off and put it back on. It just means we're ready and prepared to play that note. And particularly if you're an improviser, you might be jumping around in different ways to actually get to that note and move your finger into that position in time. It's not going to happen a lot of the time. So this is why it's so useful to know that you can hold down the B flat biz key all the time and it doesn't affect any other notes. If you enjoy content like this, don't forget to subscribe down below and click that like button to let us know that you want more videos like this. Now, I mentioned in the intro that you could get your hands on some free video resources. So follow the link in the description and not only will you get the resources for this lesson, but you'll also get 6 finger workout videos that I've created looking at all these kind of elements and some others to really get your fingers going. They're only 2-minute exercises, but you'll learn a lot from them. So don't forget to click the link in the description and get all those resources absolutely free. So the next scale we're going to look at is the scale A major, another really standard scale. Once again, we're just going to look at it over 1 octave. Now here are the fingerings for a normal A major scale, as you'd find each of those notes in a standard fingering chart. However, once again, in the case of this scale, some of these fingerings are wrong. Now, if I was playing this scale in my right hand for the notes D and E and F sharp, I would keep that G sharp key held down in preparation for playing the note G sharp. It doesn't affect the sound of any of those notes, and it means when I get there, I'm not trying to whip on that G sharp key and whip back off it as I come back down. It's really hard to do. It's actually done with your little finger, obviously, and the coordination there is tricky at the best of times, but there's no need to do that. So as soon as I started off and I played A, B, C sharp, when I got to that D, I would play that D with a G sharp finger down, and I keep it down on the E, the F sharp, and then I've already got my G sharp in position before I get there. Now, not only that, but if you were playing a really fast passage, there's actually nothing stopping you holding down the G sharp all the time, even when you're playing the A, B and C sharp notes, and that can really, really help for those tricky passages in a piece of music. So what you're hopefully beginning to see is actually fingerings are contextual. They're not just individual notes on the saxophone, although that's maybe how we first learn them, but actually it really depends on what key you're in, what notes are going to be in that line or passage in that piece of music that you're playing. It really does matter because it really adds to efficiency in your technique, and efficiency equals speed and fluency. In this next example, we're going to look at the C sharp minor scale, and this is the relative minor, same notes as an E major scale, and we're going to do it in the lower octave starting on that low C sharp. Now, we look at a low C sharp fingering, and that's completely correct. However, did you know that you can keep that low C sharp down as you move on to the D sharp and the E and the F sharp? And if you keep it down when you get to the G sharp in this, you will get a G sharp, because that low C sharp key is both a low C sharp key and a G sharp key simultaneously. And that's really efficient because as you move up the scale, instead of having to come off that key and get your little finger up to that G sharp, you can just keep it down in that position. And I keep it down all the way up to that point, and maybe release it once again like A major when I get to the A and the B and the C sharp. However, you could just keep it down even then, particularly if you're playing a really fast line in a piece of music. So this key doesn't affect anything apart from low C sharp and G sharp, and it makes it really, really useful. It also works in the upper octave, and for those of you that have got a particularly long pinky finger and you find it quite awkward getting it on that G sharp key, the normal G sharp key, you can use this C sharp fingering all the time for your G sharps. Doesn't matter whether it's the lower octave or the upper octave, it works. And if you look really closely at a lot of great players, you'll find quite a few of them only using this fingering and never using the G sharp key at all, which makes it really, really useful. So let's do a quick recap. So first of all, we've looked at the biz key that can be held down absolutely all the time when we're playing the majority of scales that contain a B flat. We've got the G sharp key, which also can be held down all the time in preparation for playing that note. And now we've got the low C sharp key, which is really useful, particularly if you're playing over your range a lot more and you're going to go down to those low notes and up, or if you've got an extra long pinky. And it works as both a low C sharp and a G sharp key. And once again, it can be held down all the time if we want to. This just gives us less to remember and more efficiency of movement across the saxophone. Now, while we're talking about the low C sharp key, it's worth noting that the low B key and the low B flat key also are auxiliary G sharp keys. In fact, if you need to jump from low B to G sharp, just keep the low B key down. If you need to jump from low B flat to G sharp, then you can just keep the low B flat key down. So basically, all those keys, those bell keys and the G sharp key, are all G sharp keys with a secondary function of low C sharp, low B, or low B flat. And that's really worth knowing because it can get you out of some really tricky situations. Something you'll notice on the saxophone that there's no roller between those bottom bell keys and the G sharp key. And there's a reason for that. You don't need one because they are all G sharp keys. So something to note is that fingering chart that you use to look up and originally learn every one of your fingerings is a non-contextual document. It's showing you fingerings in isolation. Music's never in isolation, it's always in a context, whether that be a key or a chord or anything like that. It's always in a context, and that means we need to really think about with the way we practice these structures in music to give us the ultimate fluency we all desire. Once again, if you want to grab the resources for this lesson and also get 6 2-minute finger workouts that are really going to help boost your technique, don't forget to click on the link in the description to get them delivered to you completely free. So try out some of these methods we've talked about today, and remember, always think through the scale or shape you're practicing and see if there's any efficiencies you can make with your fingering choices. I'd really like to know in the comments whether you're already using some of these methods when you're playing these scales or whether you've never come across them before, and if you've not, let me know how you get on when you try it. So until next time, take care and I'll see you then. Bye bye.